Hey, can you hear me this time?
Yeah,
Sick. How you doing?
good. How about you?
Doing pretty okay. Feeling nice and perky, refreshed, energetic. You know how it is.
No, I don't.
Uh, hey, listen,
uh,
melatonin, just pop two of them gummies before going to sleep, works miracles. Changed my life, I tell you.
oh, okay. I'll be sure to keep that in mind.
How are you? Okay, so wait. Okay, no, I don't think anyone in my audience needs to hear this. Assume kind of they know, but it's the amazing atheist, aka TJ Kirk, aka been on YouTube 8 times as long as I have. Um,
Or anyone else.
or anyone else, frankly. Back in the 1980s when they were rolling out test YouTube, he was there. And
There.
since then, we've all just kind of come on, followed in his footsteps.
Yeah.
How you been?
All my bastard children. Yeah. Fine, I guess. I don't know. I'm a little nervous. I don't usually come on other people's shows, so.
Yeah, I don't know what your format typically. Well, oh wait, I know what your traditional format is. I don't know, like, if you have a history of coming on other folks. I really appreciate you coming on my stream, by the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I don't usually do this, but you seem like an honest actor, so I feel like this is a good place to make an exception.
I try my best, but we all have our moments. I've had my spicy takes now and again, that I've had to pull back from, but I try to do it in good earnest.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you speak. Your streams are quite long, right? I mean, they average like 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah,
right?
usually like 4 to 5. Longer if it's video games.
Right. So you're bound to say some stupid shit every now and then.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people really underappreciate how difficult it is to not act like a dumb fuck every once in a while when you're broadcasting like a fifth of your life online. Like just probabilistically, eventually you're going to fuck up somewhere.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you do
So your
sorry.
chat before I did this
Yeah.
seemed like you've amassed a pretty intelligent following. I was kind of disconcerted to see how many of them think I'm a right winger, but
I think, I mean, I don't want to engage in apologetics or nothing, but back in I first got into online politics around 2011.
Right.
And back at the time, I mean, you'd still been on YouTube for a long time prior to that. But from that point up until God, like 2016, I feel like everyone's impression of you was just 100% based on like the very early anti-SJW stuff, and it never really updated as your content did.
Maybe. Very interesting. But I mean, I was on the left even then, so I don't know. Yeah, and then the stream started, and I saw the banana spam start. So I didn't know they were so kink shamey too.
Yeah, honestly, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? You don't shame me for the horsecock nonsense, but you'll go ahead and shame. Now that might be YouTube chat. YouTube chat is terrible. Okay?
That is YouTube chat. But,
yeah. Okay. Fuck YouTube chat. I don't know what those degenerates are up to.
They seemed pretty bright up until you actually started streaming, and then it kind of flooded with, I guess the undesirables.
They're animals, okay? They're freaks. I don't know what's going on in their minds. They're like ghouls that are the clamoring outside the walls of the party we're all having here on the website chat.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, forgive me if I'm a bit nervous, especially at the onset here. But yeah.
No, please. So if I may kick it off, so politically,
right,
I have heard so many different accounts of your content from so many different people. I feel like I was getting like gaslit half the time. You're a Bernie Sanders supporter, or I guess we're all ex-Bernie Sanders supporters now.
I mean, I still support Bernie, but obviously I no longer support his presidential bid. But,
yeah. We're not, or maybe we are running in third ticket. I don't know. We'll get to that. But you're obviously not right-leaning. Would you mind, before we talk about it, could you describe to me, like, how do you feel your content and your opinions have broken off from the perception people tend to have of you in, like, the broader left-leaning community?
I have no idea, honestly. I think that I can be a bit confusing, simply because I'm so scattershot. It kind of boils down to the very essence of my being tends to be sort of chaotic, and I a lot of people like to throw out different disorders, mental problems they might have to kind of
Oh yeah, people are very fond of that. Like
You
any excuse they can get to like medicalize your
yeah,
opinions.
but I am, I do have ADD and stuff, and it's really pretty severe. So I mean, I don't know. I kind of tend to be scatterbrained. I feel like sometimes my mind is sort of like some butter sliding around in a skillet, you know. So I don't know.
I completely
Um,
sympathize. I just want to say I have ADHD, so
yeah,
it is insanely difficult sometimes trying to like manage, especially in the public face. You know, I
right.
completely respect that.
Yeah, so I'm kind of all over the place, and I can kind of understand why people get confused about where the fuck I'm at. I don't even really know. You asked me last night in sort of our preliminary little brief chat we had, whether I consider myself a sock dem or a socialist, and I was like, I don't fucking know. Um, and I think a lot of that has to do with like a time scale. Um, because I think that I'm a sock dem in the immediate sense, but then I think I'm a little bit stronger than that in the long run. Um, I guess I have sort of a belief that I don't really get into too much in my videos,
Hmm.
but it is something that I kind of have in the back of my mind that, and maybe this might just be the influence of Star Trek or something like that. But I
Yeah.
feel like technology will progress to a point where the way we structure our society is going to radically change just because of that. Um, I don't know if it's going to be a utopia or a dystopia, but I mean, it's going to be something vastly different than what we're living in now.
Yeah, I feel like Gene Roddenberry, for you fucking 14-year-olds in chat, that's the Star Trek man. I feel like he did a really phenomenal job of laying the groundwork for some people's understanding of what a post capitalist society could be. There's something called capitalist realism, or yeah, that's the term, I think. Capitalist real. Yeah, if it's not that, it sounds very close to it. And it's a theory term, and what it essentially means is that there are certain normalizing traits in our culture that make it difficult for people to imagine a non capitalist society. Like, I think the classic line
Right.
is for some, it is easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism. And I
Well,
thank Star Trek
very,
for like
very
pushing back on
clearly,
that.
people love to imagine the end of the world. I mean,
Oh,
that's
yeah, because it's
but yeah,
easy.
you don't really see too many depictions of, I guess, a post-capitalist society. And Star Trek is one of the shows that does lay out. I mean, it might be the only show. I'm trying to think of something else. But it definitely it's one of the only things that gives any sort of vision of a society where money is no longer an object and stuff like that. Although I think that's kind of been retconned in some of the newer Star Treks.
Yeah, I don't. As far as I'm concerned, canon begins and ends at the Next Generation Deep Space Nine line, and everything apart from that, as far as I'm concerned, is fluff.
Right. Well, I don't know. I actually kind of enjoyed Picard, but I seem to
Oh,
be.
I haven't watched it yet. Is it good?
It seems like there's a lot of disagreement on that, but I don't think it definitely betrays some of the elements of Star Trek that I think a lot of the TNG fans probably really appreciated. And it does seem to like kind of walk back a lot of the post-capitalist stuff because it does seem like there's a lot of like monetary exchanges and stuff going on. It does retcon a lot of the elements of the Federation, I think, so that can be kind
Gotcha.
of
Yeah,
concerning. But I do think the narrative is actually pretty good, and I think that a lot of the performers are good. And I thought the overall storyline was not bad. Um, Probably not my favorite show ever, but I thought it was a pretty decent swan song for the character of Jean-Luc Picard overall.
okay. I mean, because yeah, no, I loved. I mean, I love Picard. I love Patrick Stewart. So yeah, no, I should check it out. That's my failing. If I may, yeah, because I was trying to think of like other shows or movies that depict a futurist society in a way similar to that which Star Trek has, but all I can really think of are Blade Runner esque, like edgy, like
Yeah,
cyberpunk, like corporations own this planet and that planet type stuff.
dystopia. It's really a lot easier for people to envision a dystopia than any sort of utopia. So
Yeah, it takes a lot more energy to believe in a utopia, I think. A lot of people think that there's like a cynical realism associated with like looking towards the dystopia, but I think it actually takes a lot more strength to envision and to believe in the possibility of a utopia. It means putting your heart on the line a little bit more.
it definitely does. And I think that's one of the things that was probably the failing of Picard is it didn't have the guts to envision a utopia. It had to kind of dirty up the Federation a little bit to make it more, I don't know, quote unquote, believable for people.
I
So
get you.
that's probably the wellspring from which a lot of the criticism of the show comes from. But I do think overall it had a hopeful message. So whatever. You haven't seen it, so I don't want to get too much into that.
Oh
But
yeah, no spoilerinos or nothing. But yeah, no,
you know,
that
another movie that actually had the balls to show a utopian future, albeit pretty briefly and pretty vaguely was the Bill and Ted series. So
Oh wait, no, yeah. Comrades Bill and Ted, absolutely vanguards of the socialist future. That's actually, I mean, that's actually true.
it is.
I think it takes a lot of character to even jokingly like think of a utopian society. You know, I think that it's really easy to give into cynicism. And speaking of that, if I may, because
Sure.
I'd love to talk about your perspective on this. Why do you like Bernie Sanders?
I think that when it comes to Bernie Sanders, I mean, there's reasons why I like him as a human being, and then there's reasons why I like his politics. So those are kind of separate things. But I don't know, which one are you asking me? Or are you asking both?
I guess I can understand the personal reasons. I'm sure you and I both appreciate like his sincerity. He's got like an authenticity to him. He's been fighting for the same shit for 30
Absolutely.
years. That's pretty rare.
I think he's just a good person.
Yeah, yeah.
But as far as his politics go, I mean, I think that this country, I mean, obviously we have, depending on the statistics you look at and the ways the numbers are tabulated, we have like between 30 and 60,000 people who die every year because of lack of health insurance.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think that's that's an intolerable state of affairs to me. I mean, I can't.
It's disgusting.
I can't fathom.
Yeah.
I can't fathom looking at that and saying like this is acceptable. So that's one thing. I think that I know so many people who are honest working class people who work hard, who don't get ahead, and they're fed the lie that they will get ahead if they just work hard. So there's I think a lot of I think about a lot of them when I hear about Bernie's policies about raising the minimum wage and creating mechanisms where there's paid sick leave, paid vacation time, paid maternity leave. So I think the American worker has gotten a raw deal for an insanely long duration of time. So there's that definitely resonates with me. Even though I've never really worked one of those jobs myself, been fortunate enough to figure something else out. But not everyone, has that benefit.
No, right. Not everyone can become a YouTube,
Right.
sensation.
So I mean, and I know so many people who are stuck in those kind of terrible, soul crushing sort of positions, and just not treated fairly. Their concerns are not listened to. I knew an old friend of mine used to work at a Borders Books before that went belly up, and she would constantly tell me about the terrible decision making of the people, on the top, the CEOs who have no idea what it's actually like to work in one of their stores, just throw down these horrible edicts that are bad, not only bad for their employees, but bad for their business overall. And the people who are working there at the stores know these are bad ideas, but they have no voice in the company structure. So I think, Bernie's talk about democratizing the workplace and getting, workers to have a voice within the companies that they work for. That was something that moved me. Free college. I mean, I pretty much liked his whole agenda.
No, he's pretty good across the board. There are some things he's advocated for I think I disagree with, but not along ideological lines. More of a like a fragmented, practical. Is it better to take this approach or that approach kind of thing?
Yeah.
I'm not a protectionist. Also,
an example of that, or
I'm sorry.
could you give me an example?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of rent control as it was proposed by him. I think it kind of gets in the way of a broader goal of the decommodification of housing, and I'm not a protectionist. There were a few other minor things he advocated for, but they pale in the face of like the broader good shit that he's.
But like, I mean, in terms of, overall though, I don't know. I've never seen an American. I imagine I won't see his like again for some time, but maybe.
Oh yeah, true. Oh god. Oh, I've never agreed with a politician as much as Bernie before, and I'm quite a bit to the left of him too. And I'm not exactly like an easily pleasable sort of guy. As an anarchist, I mean, when it comes to the advocacy of politicians, I tend to be a little bit, I guess, particular. But no, I mean, in spite of whatever failings I might have with him, he's a phenomenal candidate. You talked about an interest in the democratization of the workplace. And
Right.
I think that's, to use a technical term, based in epic, because I advocate primarily for market socialism, when
Right.
when I'm doing my streams. As a sort of transitionary step, I think it's really important to promote democracy of the worker before we can make these really substantive, meaningful changes, like really far-reaching stuff, like the abolition of the state, for example.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where I stand on the whole abolition of the state thing. But I do believe in the democratization of the workplace. So I don't know. If what follows from there is the abolition of the state and that can be viable, I suppose I don't really have a problem with it.
Gotcha. Do you mind if I test you on that then, on
Sure.
the presuppositional
Test
stuff? So
away.
when I talk about market socialism, what I'm usually talking about is whether this be done via like incremental policy or if there's some huge cataclysmic paradigm shift, I don't know. But broadly speaking, I like the idea of destroying the boundary between the worker and the owner, the bourgeois and the proletariat, which is fundamentally reaffirmed by the current iteration of property rights. The fact it's possible for a man to own a factory without having ever stepped inside of it or worked a day's labor within it. This is the fundamental imbalance that allows this division to come about. And the division now is larger than it ever has been in all of human history. We're reaching like Egyptian pharaoh level of the imbalance between like slave and pharaoh. Now we have worker and owner. And I think this is a fundamentally toxic, caustic relationship that destroys our democracy because it disproportionately places power in the hands of a very small group of people with different material interests.
Right.
Do you believe then that it would be that a push towards that goal, the implementation of like workplace democracy, would be like this is something we should be fighting for, not just because in the immediate sense it makes workers happier, but because it abolishes these class lines that seem to be the cause of so many problems?
Absolutely.
Fuck yeah. Okay. Nice.
No. Yeah. I mean, look. In the immediate concern, I do want my immediate concern is more about that former thing in the pragmatic sense. But if this leads to what you're talking about, I would have absolutely no objection to that. My wife was pretty disenfranchised yesterday when Bernie Sanders dropped out of the race. She was very distraught about it. And she was kind of asking me about the systems that kind of govern our lives. And I kind of described it to her as I was trying to give her some hope and be like, look, we used to live under feudalism, and now we're living in a system that's better than that. But then, of course, my stupid ass was like, well, actually, kind of what we live in now is sort of like feudalism with some
like feudalism with extra steps.
Yeah. So, I mean, I shouldn't have said that. I should have just left it there, but I had to go that extra thing. But yeah. So, I mean, when I look at the current state of things as being essentially just feudalism with bells and whistles, it's pretty hard to say that I don't want that ultimately to be dismantled. So.
Gotcha. Fuck yeah. This could be a note of cynicism on my part. It's a traditionally held belief amongst leftists that there's no way to electorally disempower the bourgeois because they control the electoral process. So I'm usually of the opinion that, and this is like the deadline that I argue for all the time. This is like the wall that I hit with my advocacy. I'm generally of the opinion that it's not really possible to vote these huge paradigm shifts into power because they wouldn't let it happen, because they'll use the media, they'll disseminate propaganda, they'll realize capitalism in such a way to discourage people from voting for it, and even if we did vote for it, there would be other obstacles. My thought is that eventually this country, maybe other countries too, are going to collapse, or they're going to experience some radical internal agitation, probably brought about by climate change at this point. I guess that's kind of like the wall we're hitting now. And when that time comes, we're going to have to make a really tough choice about which direction to take our society in, because liberalism won't be viable anymore. It can't really, the profit motive won't be able to guide people in a post-climate apocalypse future. And at that point, we either go socialist, pray God, or we go like fascist, like full ethno-nationalist, close down the borders, gun the climate refugees as they try to climb over the wall, that sort of thing. That's what I fear.
When I look at the general picture of the American psyche, I would probably, if I was a betting man, which I am, I would probably say that at least at the current moment, I feel like we're probably more likely to go the fascism route.
Yeah.
But I mean, I always have. I try to hold out some hope for. We just the forces of history are just so tumultuous and unpredictable that I can't. I don't like making predictions. I don't like people who base, who constantly try to throw out predictions and then, I mean, like, it's just, as far as I'm concerned, when someone throws a prediction out there and it comes to pass, it's not because they have some great insight. It's usually just because they fucking got lucky.
Like the chimpanzee throwing darts at the board to pick which stocks, like probabilistically.
They're like the octopus that can pick the winner of every Super Bowl for 6 years running or some shit. It's just like, it's not, the octopus is not fucking doing some kind of great analysis. It's just getting lucky. And I just think there's way too many variables. But I mean, if I was to venture a guess, I would say this country definitely is more comfortable with fascism than, I mean, like, just look at I mean, like, with every disaster that's happened in this country so far, we've seen what the psyche of the American people is. I mean, 9/11 happens, Bush's approval rating
instantly, Patriot Act, kill
Right.
500,000 Iraqis. Yeah.
I mean, it's just instantaneously like, ooh, strong man. And during this Corona crisis, I mean, we haven't seen quite the same shift to Trump, but I mean, Trump's approval is up, and his approval of the crisis is good, despite the fact that it's terrible.
It's insane.
So I mean, I think that there's something just very hardwired in the American psyche of like, we need a strong daddy figure to guide us through these tough times. So I would worry that if the effects of climate change did start to I mean, they already have started. I mean, I live in the state of Louisiana. I mean, I've seen the
You up to your ankles yet?
Not quite yet, but I mean, like, people don't realize that the state of Louisiana is not even shaped like it is on the map anymore. I mean, the coastline has degraded to the point where the state doesn't even resemble what's drawn on every map of the state at this point.
I didn't know that. Whew.
Yeah, you should go look up the what Louisiana actually looks like.
I'm glad I live on a hilltop. I'm gonna stay 200 feet above sea level minimum. Whoo boy. I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, you should definitely take a look because it's mind blowing. So I mean, we're already seeing the effects, and we're seeing all these climate refugees and stuff, and that's obviously sort of helping a lot of these right wing movements in a lot of these countries as well. Because of the fear of the immigrant and stuff. I've lost my train of thought. Where the fuck was I?
I don't know. You started at the base department and you were traveling to the base station. So I think wherever we are is good.
That butter sliding around on the fucking skillet again. That's what's going on.
I completely agree that America is predispositionally oriented towards fascism. We've always fundamentally had kind of the taste in our mouth, at least for as long as the modern conception of a nation state has been around. Even our most, economically progressive president, like Roosevelt, predicated his domestic, security on the concentration, God, what's the term? The seizure of Japanese Americans in the West Coast. And that's like our high point, Theodore Roosevelt, who was great at trust busting. I mean, he did a huge amount of work curtailing the excesses of corporations, also just destroyed Panama, I feel like we don't have many good people to look up to when it comes to like modeling this country off of.
Yeah, I don't know what it is in the American psyche, because on one hand, I feel like there is a strong anti-authoritarian streak that runs through this country, but it seems like it's something of a projection that doesn't actually exist the moment that it really needs to.
Anti-authoritarian except Patriot Act. You better, by God, salute the flag in elementary school if you don't kneel during the flag at football games, Very conditional, right. The anti-authoritarianism.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I don't know. The American psyche is a difficult thing to put your finger on, I guess. But I mean, that's why it's kind of hard to predict which direction our country would go if we were faced with a sustained sort of disaster that we had to have a sustained response to, because a lot of times we're just reacting to a fucking momentary crisis. But if there's a sustained crisis, like, climate change has, rendered large swaths of the planet uninhabitable, and there's, the oceans have become too toxic for fish to live in anymore, and, all this other stuff goes down. I don't know how we react to that. I kind of suspect that, it's going to be an ugly reaction.
Yeah, I'm afraid I agree. And things, especially with regards to like mask-off fascism, have gotten a lot worse lately. So moving, like jumping topics very slightly. I hate Gamergate. Gamergate was like the origin of my active online reing, and I did, you know.
Mhm.
I think that really early on, there were. I mean, you got a lot of these figures now, like Sargon of Akkad, I guess, or other folks, whatever. And initially, it feels like there was a tendency towards criticizing like the SJW, like the imagined, the caricature of such a person, which we all have in our heads. We all know what that means, you know,
Sure.
to each of us. And things have transitioned for a lot of people involved in that early on to like open fascism or like open white nationalism in many cases. You kind of started the anti-SJW archetype, but you aren't a fascist. Actually, you're really far from one. What I mean, what led to that? Because everything I heard about you early on in my life was just like bad, bad. Anti-SJW hates black people, hates women. I don't know how charitable those takes were initially. I can't imagine they were, but it's clear that you have a different history from a lot of the people who started out that way.
Well, so I don't know if this is to my credit.
That
or
was a
to my,
lot I just laid on you. I'm sorry. Just yeah,
no,
go
no, no,
however you
no,
like.
absolutely. Look, I defy anyone to find an anti-SJW video on YouTube that predates "It's Only Sexist When Men Do It," which is a video I made. I don't even remember what year it was. It's a video I'm still proud of. It's a video that I think was widely misinterpreted and continues to be to this day. So I was watching not The View, but one of the View ripoff shows. What was called? I don't remember what it was called. It had
I know what you mean though in my head.
it had Sharon Osbourne and some other people on it. And there was a story about a woman who had chopped her husband's penis off and thrown it in the garbage disposal. And there was a great deal of like, oh, that's yeah, and they're all
I
laughing.
completely remember that shit. That fucking. Whew.
So I was watching that and I was like, I demand consistency here. I mean, like, look, if this is okay, and look, this is where the misinterpretation happens because people thought I'm saying this shouldn't be allowed. That's not what I was saying. What I was saying was there needs to be a consistent standard. Either it's okay for these girls to laugh about this, but it's equally okay for a bunch of men to laugh about, like, this guy cut his wife's tits off and us to be like, that needs to be okay. Or neither one of those needs to be okay. And we just all need to agree that that's like maybe a little bit too far. So that was kind of the point I tried to make in that video. And that kind of the runaway success of that video and the fucking front page of fucking Reddit and, millions of views.
Oh, no, it was it took off like an earthquake. Right. It rippled across the entire internet.
That was kind of the thing that started the anti-SJW stuff on YouTube. Now, I don't know if obviously there was people bitching about, political correctness and stuff long before that. So I can't take credit overall, but I think I take credit for popularizing that sort of content on the platform. But, what started to me as sort of a critique of outrage culture has become in and of itself an outrage culture, which is, now you have it to the point where, every artistic decision that, someone in the film is being, loudly screamed about by these man babies who, can't handle fucking diversity in a fucking video game or something.
The minor like black guy shown in episode 3, minute 12, second 47 in doorway frame.
This character is a lesbian. Oh, quit shoving this down my throat. So, I mean, it went from being, when I did it, I feel like it was anti-reactionary. Now I feel like it is reactionary. When I did it, it was against outrage culture. Now I feel like it's another tendril of outrage culture. So
Is that what you mean when you say you felt it was widely misinterpreted, that people used it as a springboard to engage in their own misbehavior rather than...
I don't think it happened quite that quickly, but I think that, it went from being like, hey, don't use this moral cudgel to control art to and that's what the anti-SJW shit is now. It's a moral cudgel to try to control art. And so it became the exact opposite of what, at least on my part, it was intended to be. So, that's why it's,
Yeah,
I'm not happy about my role in the history of that. But I mean, I didn't foresee those I didn't foresee it unfolding that way.
I don't think anyone. I don't think anyone could have seen foreseen what happened to the internet, like 2011 to 2015. Prior to that point, I think that was a wholly unprecedented, political development. I understand what you're going on about, and I want to say really quickly before I continue, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to clarify. You probably wouldn't consider me an SJW in a derogative sense, would you?
No, I would not. I mean, from what I've seen, no.
Okay. I'm keeping it on.
And
That's all Patreon content. It's all secret when I'm a real
I have
SJW.
heard you describe yourself as a social justice warrior before, but you're not what I was talking about. Um, to me, when someone's like, "I'm for social justice," it's like, okay, you mean like, you want to stop the police from disproportionately arresting and harassing black people or something like that. Then it's like, okay, you're really that's actual social justice. Good for you. But if it's like, I want to, there's too many tits in this video game. It's like, all right, well, fuck you. I don't. I don't care.
I I think what's really unfortunate is this is something that I've noticed with a lot of political content online. It's really difficult to. It's easy, maybe it's not easy, but it's comparatively easy to make an argument. It's difficult to get people to interpret that argument in a way that leads them in the direction you're hoping. And I think if I had to guess, and you know this more than I do, probably what happened in your case is that there are and always have been a lot of fairly angry sexist men online. That's just, that's probably been the case for forever.
Look, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, please.
No, I was just going to say, I'm not trying to let myself totally off the hook on this shit because, there was a point where I realized things were going astray and I kept going down the path I was going down. Because I noticed that this kind of content was more and more attracting a right-wing audience and even a far right-wing audience. And, at the time I was just like, that's cool. I'm breaking down these barriers and stuff. And like, oh, it's inviting a more diverse, ideological group to my stuff. And I didn't know that basically what was really happening was everything I'd done was being co-opted and turned into something that, I can't even recognize. But, there was a deal with the devil to be made. And the deal was, hey, we're going to, if you go down this right-wing path, if you go down this like sort of alt-right or alt-light kind of path, you'll get this giant bloom of support and financial support, and we'll watch your videos and we'll hang on your every word and blah, 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 blah. And, that was the deal. And all you had to do was sell out every principle you might have had prior to that. And, I feel like I walked down that path and considered making that deal for a lot longer than I probably should have. And obviously there are people who just outright shook the devil's hand and went right on down that path. And
it is very lucrative. I mean, I think we've all at some point seen people explode, with popularity.
And I don't want to name names, but I think we all know the kind of people.
Yeah, no, anyone who watches my videos knows a number of those people. There's some. This is really interesting to me. Do you know who Destiny is?
Yes.
Yeah, he said something like this really similar back in like 2016. What he would say in the past was he was like a libertarian kind of dude, and he would make arguments for how like you shouldn't care what the race of the people you see in TV, movies, video games are. We're all human beings. You should appreciate it regardless. You shouldn't be weird about it. And he made those arguments sincerely. And what he eventually realized is there were a lot of like racist or conservative people who would hear that and agree with him like, oh yeah, definitely SJWs, you don't need to care about those things, why do you care so much? But then the moment it wasn't a white person, they would freak out, and Destiny realized that people were only going along with his arguments as long as they favored them, and as soon as it had to be held to a consistent standard that didn't favor their ideological predisposition, they got really, really mad. And I think that might be the story of like...
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Said. I mean that I've not watched a whole lot of Destiny, so I'm not super familiar with his content. I've seen him around the way a few times, but yeah, I feel like that's pretty similar in circumstance. It's like I feel like a lot of the arguments that I made, especially during the anti-SJW stuff, I was making them in good faith and sincerity, but I feel like a lot of people were just using them as a tool to achieve a more I don't know if I want to use the word sinister, but that's the word that comes to
Right,
mind.
right, yeah. And but there was, I mean, there is a legitimate core there. I've done the exact same thing. I have made arguments on stream. I'm sure most of the people watching know that ended up. I was prideful, and I made them in a context where they were very easy to misinterpret, and it ended up bolstering the positions of people who I disagree with very strongly. I completely sympathize with that, and it's really really difficult. I think to make these positive arguments that don't kind of go off the rails in that way, that don't end up attracting people who misuse them maliciously, because there are so many people online who are so willing to deliberately, I guess, twist the arguments of popular online figures in such a
Right.
way as to benefit their ideology.
And look, another thing is, you're obviously a fount of nuance, whereas
I
my con
try. I
yeah,
try my best.
I think you perform admirably in that regard. But I
Thank
mean,
you.
my content, I've never, I'm primarily considered myself trying to be entertaining. So a lot of times, nuance. I mean, I try to employ it, when I can, but a lot of times nuance is the enemy of being entertaining, at least,
Mhm.
with my skill set. Maybe you don't have that problem as much. In fact, I
No,
know for a fact you don't.
I
I've seen
promise
you
you
be
I have
nuanced.
that problem too.
I've found you be, I've seen plenty of times where you've been nuanced and entertaining at the same time. It's maybe a little harder for me. So I think that because a lot of times I've made arguments in a bombastic and abrasive fashion, it's kind of lended itself to, maybe there wasn't enough specificity. In fact, I know there wasn't. So like when it comes to some of the like anti-feminist stuff, I really wish I could go back and be more specific about who I was criticizing. But obviously I can't turn back time and do that. Um, but
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to live and learn.
Oh, well,
It's
yeah, of
not
course.
to change.
I've certainly haven't. I have significantly modified how I try to approach a lot of issues, and I'm curious because I think what's interesting to me, I think, is that a lot of the schism that is found between do you okay wait I'm not trying to be like prescriptive or broad here. I feel as though you and Shoe on Head have a sort of a similar position on the internet in the sense that you're highly entertaining left-leaning content creators who have a mixed audience and a past where they feel as though their arguments have been misinterpreted by more like conservative or bigoted people. Would you agree with that, or would that be reductive on my part?
I don't know. Honestly, I like Shu. I follow her on Twitter and stuff, but I have not really watched too much of her content, so I'm not exactly sure. Um, and it's not out of. I don't watch a lot of YouTube in general. It's very rare
Yeah,
that
who
I
has
act.
time, honestly?
What's that? Yeah, I just well, apparently a lot of people, but I don't really watch a lot of YouTube or YouTubers. I've found myself watching a lot of your stuff. I watch a lot of Kyle Kalinske stuff. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't really watch too many people, so I'm not sure. A lot of times when people ask me about this person or that person, I'm just kind of in the dark.
I gotcha. What do you picture, or like what associations do you have with the word like idpol, like identity politics? What does that mean to you?
That's a complicated question. You know, um, fuck. Could you give me something a little more specific with it?
No, yeah,
Because
yeah.
my mind doesn't know where to go when it's that broad.
This is the issue that I have too, because there are two definitions for idpol that I hear used usually.
Okay.
There's constructive leftist intersectional identity politics, which is very proactive, very interested in like breaking down lines of oppression. And
Mhm.
then there's this like weird, like virtue signally liberal idpol, which I think is what you were critiquing in your first video, because to some people, the oohoo, cutting a man's dick off, yeah, shit is feminism. To them, this is them like striking a blow at the man in what I would consider to be an incredibly toxic way. So when you think like idpol, do you align more with the former or the latter? Do you think it's more of like a toxic repressive force or something
The
more?
you know, I don't know that I understand the concept of intersectionality enough to critique it. I've struggled with understanding the definition of that term for a long time. I kind of, and maybe this is reductionist on my part, but I kind of start to see it as like, uh oh, it's oppression Olympics again. Uh, where it's like, oh well, I'm black. Well, I'm trans. Trans beats black. Well, I'm black and trans. Well, I'm black and trans and a person of not a person of color,
Native
but
American
uh,
ancestry.
I'm trying to fucking think of the politically correct term for midget, but I can't. So midget.
I think
Uh,
little person is
yes,
currently the.
little person. Yes, thank you. So I that's as far as I could kind of get with it. But I mean, I feel like that's probably a fairly unsophisticated understanding, but that's about as far as my my mind could really wrap around it.
Would you mind if I picked your brain on it?
Sure, go ahead, diagnose me.
Oh, well, yeah. So I'm a sociology major. This is one of the
Sure,
things. This is one of the very few things I feel as though I actually have a specific academic knowledge, as opposed to like I talk
gotcha.
to some cool people on Discord. But
Yeah,
what I was taught with intersectionality, I had this conversation with Vegan Gains. I don't think we got very far in it though. But the gist of intersectionality, as it was explained to me, is that there are some types of inequalities that don't really that can't really be adequately examined if you only look at them along the line of one axis of oppression. Earlier,
right,
for example, you were talking about how an example of real social justice was trying to prevent black men from being like disproportionately locked up, you know?
right. Yeah,
Which undeniably happens here. And I think that's an excellent example of the importance of intersectionality, because in that moment, it's not just black people that are disproportionately locked up, though they are, and it's not just men that are disproportionately locked up, though they are. It's black men, because there's an intersection there between the racial element of their subjugation and the fact that as men they're considered to be more violent, dangerous, animalistic, and these things kind of reify each other. And intersectionality is kind of a strike back against attempts to address oppression that only end up reifying other axes of oppression. For
right.
example, with that show, the dick cutting off, I wish I knew the name so I could say it more offhandedly. But with
I don't
with
the
that, I'm
the
sorry.
decapitation show. Yeah,
Right, the decapitation show, exactly, as it was no doubt named. That I think would be a great example of what intersectionality is trying to fight, because that would be an example of like a very milquetoast sort of shallow attempt at criticizing male power, but in doing so you end up reifying a bunch of really shitty ideas about gender. The idea that like a penis is like the apex of a man's masculinity, the idea that like men should be able to just take harm on the chest because they're inherently stronger, so they shouldn't be able to complain about it, which kind of suggests women are weaker because that implies men being the sponges for pain. That would mean like women are more dainty or ephemerate or can't be touched. And it ends up like worsening everything. So that's how it was described to me, basically. The intersectionality is a response to those really shitty attempts at fixing imbalance.
right. So I mean, I guess that it's I guess in that sense, it's kind of important to make those sort of distinctions. And I know this is a little bit, well, this is more than a little bit outmoded, but I mean, I really, and maybe I'm sure you'll tell me where I'm wrong on this one, because I know that you don't agree with what I'm about to say, but
Oh.
um, I really feel like the whole color blindness approach has been dismissed too readily, because I just don't see how you actually solve these problems in the long term as long as you continue to cordon people off in these different groups.
I think there are some. It would take a lot of discourse, I think, but I think there are some ways in which I agree with you. For example, I've never gotten behind the idea. I don't like the idea of like separate black graduations, for example, and in college campuses. Sometimes I feel like that creates more problems than it solves. I think so. Wait, if I could, I think that bad colorblindness, like air quotes, bad
Mhm.
colorblindness is like black men are disproportionately arrested. People are disproportionately arrested. We need to make sure the justice system is
Right.
fair to everyone.
I mean,
And
I mean, yeah, that's the thing is it's if you're too colorblind, you're disregarding if you don't see race, then it's pretty hard to see racism,
yeah,
right? So that's kind of like the
yes,
problem. But at the same time, I do feel like if you don't work towards a world where someone being black or someone being trans or someone being, whatever, if you don't work to a world where that's not even a fucking factor in your appraisal of them, then I just don't see how long term you solve those problems. So I don't know how you find a balance there. But
yeah.
kind of
No,
where
I
I'm at.
think that's no, I completely agree. I think that's really tough. I think the best thing you could say, like broadly, is only to only ascribe distinctions insofar as it's absolutely necessary to fight oppression, and in all other instances to do your best to treat everyone equally. Like I would never advocate for like treating like women or trans people like differently than men or cis people. I mean,
Right.
if they ask to, like if they want you to treat them different, sure. But like as a broad group, that I feel like we kind of we're reifying the differences, and as long as there are differences we recognize, then there will be people who want to sow oppression along those
Oh,
differences.
that kind of reminds me. There was a lot of people in your in the chat before the show started that were kind of asking about trans rights kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So just so it's like 100% clear, I robustly support trans rights, and there's never been any sort of reluctance on my part to do that. I don't know why this is like a meme where it's like get TJ to say trans rights. I don't know what the
I have
origin
a
is.
really GSM audience. They just get really excited hearing their rights reified. I think they're because every time I boot up stream, I talk for 4 hours about how everyone wants them dead. So I think they really like the contrast.
Well, just to please them, I'll say it a few times in a row. Trans rights, trans rights, trans rights, trans rights.
Oh, don't spoil them, please. They're brats. They're gonna be asking for it every fucking stream.
They're hungry. They're hungry for it. Hey, everyone should be hungry for their rights.
And trans rights too, of course. Sensible, cheap transportation across the continent.
Not to switch the topic too much, but I do think we should kind of get into this burn your bus stuff, right?
Yeah. Do you want to lay out your position?
So, look, I've been obviously realizing I had this conversation with you coming up. I feel like I've contemplated this, and I feel like I've softened on it, but I haven't changed my mind. So, as far as I can tell, the top reason to support Biden in the general election is probably to not allow Trump to stack the Supreme Court with conservative justices, right?
That's probably the main one. Yeah, that alongside climate change.
Right. Well, yeah. But I mean, like ultimately, that's the big thing. We don't want a Supreme Court stacked with those right wingers because they're going to make a lot of regressive decisions that are going to affect a lot of people. Especially obviously that would be a huge threat to Roe v. Wade and stuff like that. But here's the thing that I keep getting stuck on, and maybe you can help me with this. When I think about what the fucking progressive left really needs to signal to America that it is now ascendant and it is now, a force to be reckoned with, is it needs the presidency. Mm-hmm. Because whatever the limitations might be on the actual power that bestows, which I think people underestimated how powerful the presidency really is a lot of times.
Yeah, now that executive actions have been normalized, like to the extent that they have by Obama, I feel like the presidency is more powerful than any other, like easily more powerful.
And it seems to get more powerful with each passing president too, which is a concerning trend, but whatever. But that all the more reason why it's so important to control that position. There's no higher position in the land. There's no more important place that we need to be visible and that we need to have our voices heard. And that was why Bernie Sanders was such an appealing, figure for us. So if we throw our support behind Biden and it's enough to push Biden to victory, which by the way, I'm pretty dubious of that prospect.
Yeah, me too.
I almost kind of feel like this argument might be a moot point because I don't think Biden is going to win either way, but whatever, we'll set that aside. If Biden is the victor, then when does the left when can we really reasonably expect to have another shot at the White House? I think that under the most optimistic fucking circumstance, you're looking at 8 years, but I think more likely you're looking at 12 plus years before we have another viable shot at getting in the White House. Whereas if Trump wins re-election, I think we have another shot in 4 years. So that's kind of what's been the sticking point for me thus far. What do you think of that?
So here's my concern. I guess there are two arguments that I want to make, and the second one can only be made as long as people accept the first one. The first argument is that if we just look at the duration of the presidency, just the 4 to 8 years, whatever. Well, it could only be 4 for Trump now because he's had a term. If we just look at the next 4 years, Biden would be a less harmful president than Trump. I think most people can agree on that, because if anyone actually takes a serious look at their policies, there are so many ways in which Biden is better than Trump. It's insane.
No argument.
Yeah. A lot of people disagree because there are a lot of people on the really far left, and to them, everything like right of Sanders just fits into this blob of like neo-fascism. And while
I feel like I fall prey to that to an extent, but I mean, if you really hold my feet to the fire, I can admit that I think Biden would be a better president than Trump.
Yeah, okay, but this is in no way, shape, or form like an endorsement of Biden. I fucking hate the guy, and I think he's a horrible candidate.
Yes, he's horrible.
I
think he's the weakest candidate since Bob Dole against an incumbent president.
Oh yeah, he's so weak. We can only hope that people's anti-Trump fervor like compensates for that. But that's that's the first position that I need to take. The second one is like, how do we rise? The far left or just the left? I mean, honestly, like the DNCs that exist now can hardly be described as left-leaning.
Yes.
So how do we rise? And what my thought here is, there are two worlds that we can end up walking into. One in which we support Biden broadly, dejectedly, begrudgingly, and then as soon as the presidency is done, we fight like hell to get our policies pushed, local elections, down ballot voting, that sort of thing. And the second world is where we don't. We cross our arms, we say, fuck it, Biden doesn't represent our interests, we're not voting for the guy. Sorry, should have done more to cater to us. And my concern is that at the end of the day, our ability to build power comes from public support, for people's belief that we have better solutions than the centrist-leaning DNC. And I feel as though crossing our arms and trying to hold the DNC hostage or protest not voting will lead to a media narrative that will make it very easy to condemn us as the reason Trump won again. Whereas if we do begrudgingly support Biden, the media will still try, but I feel as though we'll be able to make a much stronger argument that we're ultimately working to fight against Trump and everything he represents. And that might lead to more public support down the road.
Possibly. I feel like you could also look at it from the perspective of, the left is maybe at its most energized when the opposition is in power. I mean, that does seem to kind of be the case to some extent, because it seems like a lot of times when you get a Democrat in there, even if it's a centrist corporatist Democrat, people kind of get complacent on our side of the aisle. Maybe not as far on that side as you and I are. I think you a little further than me, but that's fine. But it seems like a lot of people who are just marginally to the left or who are a little bit more in the supposed center get really fucking complacent when their guys in power, and I think you see that during the Obama administration, just total inability to hold that guy to any sort of account. And, there weren't any of these, I don't feel like we made a lot of those inroads under the Obama administration.
We were asleep. We were asleep the whole time.
It was like we were in a daze. So, I mean, like, I just don't know. I feel like almost like Trump might be, better for the left to stay energized, to stay out there and to keep making its arguments. And honestly, I just feel like trying to build a strategy around what the mainstream media is going to do is just ultimately going to always backfire, because they're never going to be kind or charitable to, any sort of genuine leftist cause, because they're corporatists to the core. They're owned by that.
Yeah, their material interest will always be to stomp on us. I do have a counter, if I may, to that.
Go ahead.
I agree the left was asleep back during the Obama administration. Even back after the 2008 financial crisis, Occupy Wall Street was hardly leftists. There were leftists in Occupy Wall Street, but it was not like a broad populist movement to address the excesses of capitalism. It was more of just an expression.
It was more of an emotional reaction to.
Yeah. It lacked the structure for it to be meaningfully politically effective. And what I'm curious about is it possible that now that we've gotten closer to actualizing leftist populism, we might not fall asleep again given a Biden presidency. After all, the left wasn't really active back during the Bush years either, even though we had opposition presidency in. There were plenty of, like we had, of course, like The Daily Show and Stephen Colbert. We had people who would mock.
I think the form of the left at that point was the anti-war movement.
Right. And they were largely drowned out by the media, at least immediately. But I wonder if now that we have Bernie Sanders as a reifying sort of totem to show us that A, these ideas exist, B, we can fight for them as a group, and C, we know they can get close to the seat of power, it might be possible for us to avoid falling asleep again. We might have been given that symbolism that we lacked before to keep us from falling back asleep. And the second thing I want to say, which is much shorter, I apologize, is I agree the media is generally not going to be very charitable to us no matter what happens. I know that no matter what happens, Bernie bros are going to get blamed. If Biden wins, Bernie bros like, oh, haha, see, we didn't need socialism, idiot. And if Trump wins, like, oh, if you voted for Biden, we would have won, idiot. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we get fucked either way.
Right, exactly.
But I don't know if us crossing our arms and protesting and not voting is going to get much material good done either.
Let me be clear on one thing. I would not advocate for us to not show up to the ballot box. I would say focus on the down ballot candidates.
Local stuff, policies.
Try to find, as much stack that as much as you possibly can with the furthest left candidates you could possibly fucking find and vote for. And there's been I'm guilty of this as well, just focusing way too much on the presidency and not enough on all these down ballot candidates. Like, I don't even know what a fucking alderman does. I'm going to find out. So, I think that we need to focus on that. And, but so the fact that I'm saying we should go to the ballot box in the first place, I kind of feel like maybe, I guess while I'm there, I can fucking check the Biden box. So that's why I'm kind of like softened on it a little bit, because I'm already planning on going to the fucking polls anyway. So I guess, maybe I could spare a fucking vote for Biden. But at the same time, it kind of, it ends up rubbing me the wrong way in a different way, where I feel like I'm kind of validating the bad behavior of the fucking DNC. And I really am concerned that, we won't have, we know from these climate change, the science on climate change, that we have such a fucking limited time to deal with this, that it's like, I hope we could do this again in 4 years instead of having, because I don't think that, Biden's going to join, he's going to sign the Paris Climate Accord, but is he really, he's not going to fucking build a new green infrastructure or something. He's not going to do anything fucking radical to actually solve those problems. He might be marginally better.
I think, again, it's whether or not like these policies are listed. I don't know if that means they're going to follow through on them, but I think he has listed a, some sort of like a cut down version of the Green Deal. Like we acquiesce to the idea of what you're advocating for. Here's our pragmatic version, One of the things that gives me hope in that regard is that Biden may himself be a senile, cottering, fool, but from a purely materialist standpoint, like if we just look at this from the capitalism trying to reinforce its own interests, there's no benefit to letting the country melt. Trump and the populist right are more interested in racism and campaign rallies than they are in making sure there's a country in 30 years. Whereas I feel like even the milquetoast corporatism of Biden is preferable in the sense that there are at the very least sane people who can look down, at the peasants who make up this country and think like, I don't care about them. But a lot of property would get damaged if we all went underwater. So maybe we should do something about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that anybody in politics looks that far ahead, but it's something where I'm going to definitely be kind of wrestling with it back and forth for a time, because I see the argument for harm reduction and stuff, but I do worry that if we don't get someone who's a little bit to the left of Biden, well, actually a lot to the left of Biden in there,
way off far left field, yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like if we don't get that soon, I feel like there's such a ticking clock going on right now. But at the same time, Is it worth sacrificing the Supreme Court for that? I don't know. I mean, I guess there is the outside possibility of expanding the Supreme Court. FDR tried to do it and failed.
Like packing the court, put in like a bunch of folks in
right.
there.
Well, FDR tried to raise it up to 15 justices so that he could get, more of his, get a court that was more friendly to his not Green New Deal, but his new original New Deal policies.
The old New Deal, yeah.
Right, the old New Deal. But he was obviously unsuccessful in that. But I mean, there's nothing in the Constitution that says there has to be 9 Supreme Court justices. And a lot of people don't realize that. So we could try to water it down that way. Probably wouldn't be a successful endeavor because even if FDR couldn't do it, we're probably not going to get it done in these fucking super polarized times.
What my dream is, I think my ideal outcome here would be one in which Biden wins, and because of the incompetency of his administration, they're unable to meaningfully fix many of the problems in this country. Things are marginally better than they would be under Trump, because at the very least, Trump isn't sacrificing 1,000 DACA kids at the foot of the White House every day. But nonetheless, things are bad, and the left does not go to sleep. We look at the system, and through the failure of Biden and the milquetoast corporate Democrats, we're able to radicalize an entire new generation of people who thought that, hey, Bernie Sanders is cool and all, but we need to vote Biden for electability. We need to convince these people that that's not enough of an argument. And I feel like that's our best shot at doing it. If we participate, we vote for Biden, we say, hey, we fucking hate this guy, but okay, whatever, we'll cast the vote, better than Trump. And then the moment Biden starts to fuck up, we take to the streets and we get people really angry about it. That's my dream scenario. Yeah. I don't know if it'll play out that way.
I would just be so scared that we try to implement that. And, once again, I'm fucking, I want to just reiterate that I'm dubious that even with our support, Biden could fucking win this. But assuming that he can, I would just be so scared that you would see the same level of complacency you saw during the Obama years. But maybe the fact that Bernie Sanders built a powerful grassroots movement that showed that you don't need special interest and super PACs to finance a fucking campaign. Maybe the fact that those people are still out there, they haven't gone anywhere. Maybe that means that, we won't fall asleep again. I just hope that, there's enough admonishing voices to keep Biden honest, and there's not this, powerful chorus of like, how dare you criticize Biden because he's a Democrat and we only criticize Republicans, which seemed to be what happened, during the Obama years.
Yeah. I hope we can, because it feels like Obama has kind of replaced Hillary as the golden boy, the golden child of.
I think honestly, I think it was reported in The Hill, which I don't know, that's not the greatest paper, but the prospect of a lot of Democrats salivating about Obama as this sort of super surrogate for Joe Biden. A lot of people think that the reason that Bernie might have left the race as early as he did instead of going the distance is because they wanted to be able to trot Obama out as a surrogate for Joe Biden, because obviously Joe Biden is terrible at speaking for himself. So basically, like, make it almost like you're voting. They're trying to make it.
They want to bring it back. They want to make it 2008 again.
Yeah, it's a natural extension of how Joe Biden has campaigned. I mean, Obama's every other word out of his mouth, so you might as well have the real deal out there, fucking pushing for you. People almost, I think the Democrats are trying to get people into the sense of like feeling like they're almost voting for Obama again.
Yeah. Well, because the Democratic electorate are infants. They have no understanding of what's going on in this country. It's like a safety blanket for them. They just want to go back to the days when they could turn on the TV, where Obama was a competent speaker, which he undeniably is, and they didn't have to think about politics because they could trust that their omniscient daddy is smoothing over all the problems in the country without their involvement. It's never going to happen again. I'm hoping that eventually, like, if Biden fucks up, because Biden becoming president isn't going to fix anything. And it's like every problem we're experiencing right now, there might be minor harm reduction in some respects, but things are going to continue getting worse. And I'm hoping that can be a wake-up call, but I honestly don't know. And as you've said, it's probably a moot point because Trump's going to fucking win anyway.
Right. I just feel like when I see the line, when I saw that clip of Trump at that press conference, I don't know if you've seen it, where, he's asked about a tweet that Biden wrote, and Trump just starts saying, he didn't write that. He can't write. He doesn't even know where he is. I'm just like, fuck, Trump's gonna win.
He's such an easy target. Holy shit. Listen, Biden could beat him in a push-up contest on stage, okay? That I believe in. Everything else, Trump is going to nail him to the fucking wall. He's so easy to make fun of.
Look, people think Trump is stupid, and in some ways he is. But I mean, like, when you go back and watch Trump on that Republican debate stage and just watch how he just clowns on everyone else on the fucking stage. He's a master at it. He doesn't even have to. I mean, like, and he does it in the simplest, most direct.
He's a TV personality. That was literally his job.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, he's amazing at it. You know, he obviously he doesn't resonate with everybody, but the people he does resonate with, he resonates hard. So I just feel like you're going to have this doddering fucking old man who looks perpetually confused versus this just mangler, this fucking just dynamo of fucking.
No, credit where credit is due. Trump is genuinely talented at shitting on other people. Not a great candidate, not a great characteristic for the presidency, but by God, does it treat him well at rallies and debates, at least for his audience.
I mean, yeah, and they eat it up. They love it. And, you know, I mean, he fucking stood toe-to-toe with Hillary Clinton, who is, by the way, way smarter than Joe Biden and way more articulate than Joe Biden, just as evil as Joe Biden, but whatever. She's certainly quicker on her feet.
Oh, yeah.
And Trump fucking trounced her. And he trounced her by just looking her directly in the face and be like, yeah, you be in fucking jail, bitch.
And the crowd loses it, yeah.
Ooh, Jerry.
The first debate between Trump and Hillary Clinton back in 2016 was when I realized that Trump was going to win. I actually have a fond memory of this because I was in college at the time, and my now girlfriend, who I was just friends with at the time, I invited over to watch with me because I was really excited to watch the debate, and she accidentally like tripping on a rock on the way over, so we had to like deal with that, and I missed the first 20 minutes. But what I watched the rest of was Hillary Clinton deftly responding to every single policy. Hillary Clinton is very, very smart. She played it out beautifully, and then Trump would just pause to the wrong, and then just like move on to the next topic. And people loved it, and I feel like this is politics forever now. Joe Biden's many failings don't play as well to the Democratic audience as Trump's do to his. Trump is like a rapist. Who cares? Republicans love rape. They'll vote for that shit. Absolutely. Biden is a rapist. Now we actually have a conversation about whether or not, what's her name? Tara Reid, who was the most recent accuser?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we have sorry?
I think she actually pronounces it Tara.
Tara?
Yeah.
Yeah, and now we have a conversation about whether or not Tara Reid makes Biden unelectable. I'm not saying, by the way, that it shouldn't. I'm just saying that Trump doesn't even get to have that conversation. Everything he does is just sort of, they let it go. It's fine. They even like it. I don't think Biden can beat Trump. I don't think it's possible. I'd be extraordinarily surprised if it happens.
If he does, it's going to be the same way that he beat Bernie Sanders, by just having the full weight of the Democratic establishment coalescing around him and being surrogates for him and pushing him at every fucking, like, I would really not be surprised if Biden, before he even gets to the general, makes some sort of announcement to the effect of, like, you know, due to health reasons, I can't fucking continue, and here's your different, you know, candidate.
Your vice president, Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I mean, there's people in my audience who are hardcore believers that there is a bait and switch kind of Hillary thing going on.
That's the Vanta black pill right there. That's like the black hole pill.
I mean, if it happened, I would not be shocked. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but you know, I'm keeping my mind open to the crazy possibility, especially in this wild and wacky year of 2020.
Oh yeah, there's a limitless capacity for suffering in our futures, you know. Never turn down the possibility. I just want to say really quickly, I meant to say it earlier, I forgot, now I remember. I really appreciate you responsibly encouraging people to vote down ballot. One thing that really frustrates me, okay, I think that the Bernie or bust argument is a little bit more nuanced than I've maybe treated in the past, though I'm still fairly comfortable in my position. But one thing that really fucking gets my goat is when super angry leftists online just forget that the presidency is one of 1,000 things that you vote for when you go in November. And local elections are the bedrock of actual grassroots change when it comes to changing like how the Democratic Party is structured. So if people forgo that, I think that's unforgivable.
You know, I was I definitely I struck that position in 2016. I kind of regret it. I don't kind of regret it. I do regret it. I was just definitely, I had more of a like, fucking the whole system is just fucking a piece of shit anyway. I mean, it is, but at the same time, I mean, if I'm going to preserve any sort of sense of, engagement in American politics, and look, I've looked into the possibility of trying to immigrate elsewhere, and it's just too hard. So I'm going to the only option I really have on the table is try to change this country. So, I do plan to vote. I don't know if I'll cast a vote for Biden or if I'll cast a protest vote for someone else, but I'm going to be there and I'm going to fucking try to support the most progressive agenda that's possibly available to me. Now I live in Louisiana, so it's really going to amount to fucking...
You've only got so much wiggle room when it comes to
There's
that.
only so much I can really fucking do, but we'll see.
I don't think I could ever leave this country. Even back when Trump won, I knew a lot of, hippy dippy college kids who were talking about like going up to Canada or something. I guess if people want to do that, they can. I don't know. I think we live at an extraordinary point in history right now with the populist sentiment that's been disseminated. I feel like we're on the cusp of potentially some really radical change. I don't know if it's going to be good change, but I'm really happy that I get to live in a place where that's happening,
I have a certain affinity for America, but I've gotten to a point where I was like, New Zealand looks nice, So,
if Roe v. Wade gets overturned here, I wouldn't fault anybody who wants to leave because that's some no negotiation shit right there. You either you get you get abortions or you don't.
I am proud of the fact that even when I was initially on my YouTube channel a right-wing libertarian, I never fell for Ron Paul. So.
I fell for Ron Paul back when I was a right-wing libertarian. Shit.
I didn't. I was like, right-wing libertarian, huh? And then it's like, I want to go back to the gold standard. I'm like, has that ever been tried? And I looked it up and it had, and I was like, oh, it didn't work. That's not a good idea. And then it was like, I'm against abortion. It's like, that doesn't sound libertarian. That sounds
what? Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute, huh? I thought we were about freedom over on this side. And so that's
should slavery be illegal? Let's let the states decide,
Yeah, okay. Never mind. I'm not done with this. I think Ron Paul might have actually been the beginning of the end of my right-wing libertarianism because I saw them all embracing this guy and I was like, okay, yeah, I like him on some things. And he seems honest, at least about what his politics are. But then I'm like anti-abortion, gold standard. I mean, this dude's kind of a fucking lunatic, huh?
Well, that's why I liked him. Wait, that's exactly why I liked him too. Initially, it was the authenticity, Yeah. I think inherently, maybe this is an American thing. I don't know if every culture places weight on this, but I think there's like a tendency towards deeply respecting people who stand out against the system in the same way that this leads me to love Bernie Sanders now, who is very authentically, anti-establishment and everything that he's ever done, to Ron Paul, who is kind of sort of anti a little bit. I mean, he's still part of the Republican Party, that's not really that impressive.
I mean, he definitely fucking checked that authenticity, especially for a politician. I think the standards
compared to others, true.
Yeah, I mean, like he definitely seemed a little bit more like he was a real person. And I guess I kind of gravitated towards that initially, but then when I started, I mean, like it was the abortion stuff was just a fucking total deal breaker. The gold standard stuff was pretty much a total deal breaker as well. Because I mean, Churchill tried that shit after the end of World War II, and it was a fucking disaster.
I don't actually know anything about it. I don't really know. It seems like libertarians have a lot of really weird. Every time they start talking about the Fed, I feel like they bring out some really strange arguments that don't actually have anything to do with making people's lives better. And it gets really, really weird. I got to research more about that. I just debated. You saw I debated Adam Kokesh. I probably should.
I did. I watched the whole thing. I was very interested because I actually debated him as well a few times in the past, and he's a frustrating conversation to have, honestly.
He's sincere, at least. I really do respect that.
I just want to say, I've had interpersonal sort of discussions with him. Not really discussions, but like on a person-to-person level, I actually really like Adam Kokesh, but talking politics with him is really like a frustrating fucking endeavor for me. It just, and the conversation that you had with him, it went exactly the same place with me. I'm just like, you're going to end up with a bunch of like corporatist
warlords,
fighting one another and just using violence to suppress the citizenry. How are you going to prevent that? And it's just like, he's got no answer. his answer is get rid of the state, and then Candyland happens, and then we all eat fucking
Turn
marshmallows.
America into Warhammer 40K. You've got like the Amazon Tau, and then you've got like the Walmart death squads, you know, rolling in Space Marine gear to exterminate us, the peasant villages.
Cool. Yeah, see, it is. See how much easier it is to envision a dystopia.
Exactly. It's so much easier because, hey, you know what? Utopias have to have basically no problems. Dystopias can have any number of problems. That's
right.
Wide range.
Give credit to Adam. He does envision a utopia. It makes no fucking sense, but goddamn it, he envisions it. So bless him.
And I do respect that. I'm sorry, this is completely apropos of nothing. Do you up and to your left? I think it's to your left. Is that a box set of the Preacher graphic novel, or is that something else?
That is the Preacher graphic novel.
Oh, fuck yeah, okay.
That's the whole series contained in hardcover.
Oh, fuck yeah, okay, based. Sorry, just wanted.
And by the way, if the patriotic streak I do have, I think probably exists because of those.
Oh shit! Wait, can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure.
Oh my God, the Preacher books were so influential on me when I was younger. I wanted to name my first kid Jesse. It's gender neutral, you know, it can go either way. Oh my God, and it's so, I love it. It's such a good graphic novel, but there are so many fucking problems that never get addressed in it, like problematic stuff, like the homophobia and the what have you. And I swear to God, I love those graphic novels, but there was like a brain rot.
I think I'm a little bit more forgiving of that stuff. I mean, and by the way, I mean, I'm bisexual, so you know, I just doesn't really
and based
still doesn't matter to me. But you know, and look, you know, I believe this is why I did the whole anti-SJW thing. It's like because I have a tremendous respect for the artist and whatever they have to say, and I think anyone who expects artists to conform to social norms of any kind or expects them to be sane people who are well-adjusted is fucking not. It doesn't respect what artists are.
I want to clarify. I completely agree. It's more of a looking at my childhood and how back then I interpreted the protagonist versus how I do now. I wouldn't change a thing about Preacher, though. I think it stands on its own.
Well, look, I think that there is a sort of, you know, look, there is an element of, and I'm going to fucking get shit for even fucking using this term without being facetious about it. There's an element of toxic masculinity to Preacher for sure. But I think the end when Jesse does finally learn to cry and you know, make amends, I think that, well, it's not to spoil it. I guess I did, but but you know, I think that was kind of a redemption arc and a repudiation of the way he was throughout the series. But I guess it's hard to say.
No, I think so too. Hey, listen, nobody in my audience is going to judge you for saying toxic masculinity. Right. But no, I agree. I think one of the things that really bugged me in retrospect reading it is that there were no non-silly gay characters. Every gay character is like a rapist or a joke.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing that bugs me. But again, it was written back during the 1990s.
Well, there was some pretty interesting. I think there was a few. Look, so yeah, there was the rapist guy. The what's his name?
He had like the flat cap.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Buggerin' time. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, he was hired. He thought he didn't know he was actually raping someone. He thought he was hired for a scene.
That's true.
He was not there to, he wasn't a legitimate rapist. He was there to, you know, do a rough scene with somebody. So
deceived into being, yeah.
Right.
It's,
you know, that was, he you know, that was a deception on someone else's part.
Yeah, well, guys, it's a weird comic. Guys, read the comic, then you can judge. Okay. It's a weird, it's good. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, if you're not familiar with the context of Preacher, sounds probably way worse than it.
Yeah, it's a really good graphic.
That in there too, but whatever, it's fun.
Wait, can I hit you on the toxic masculinity thing though?
Yeah, well, hold on. Let me just say one more thing about Preacher.
Yeah.
I just want to tell you. I don't really meet too many people who've read Preacher, so I do love a scene when Jesse is on a road trip across America, and he's listening to a talk radio show.
I know this fucking scene.
And there's a liberal feminist and a fucking Rush Limbaugh type conservative arguing. And she's talking about the patriarchy and all this other stuff. And he's talking about, you know, family values and all the bullshit he talks about. And Jesse fucking pulls over because there's no cell phones, I guess, at the time. He pulls over, he gets on a payphone, he calls into the show, and he uses his power to make everyone obey him. And he's just like, I'm, you know, he basically says, like, I want these two people to just cut the bullshit and tell us what they really want. And the feminist was like, I want dick. Give me dick. And then it's like, oh, that's interesting. What about you? And then the Rush Limbaugh character's like, I want dick too. I love that fucking scene.
Dick is the Dick is the gloriously unifying, I guess, political. It's like the nexus of all
Yeah.
political thought. Everything is just pathologized sexuality. It does
And
ultimately come down to that.
you should never shove a dick in a fucking garbage disposal unless it's consensual.
That's true. And even if it is, you should probably double check to make sure that's really what they asked for.
You might want to make sure. Yeah.
So
Okay, so back to toxic
Dick's in mind. I'm really curious because this is a fairly modern phenomenon. Again, you've been online for a lot longer than I have. Speaking of toxic masculinity, what's your perspective on on the incel thing? The modern preponderance of deeply lonely guys who go online to form and be a part of those communities.
I think with the incels, I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy for them. I think that I think it's really not a matter of like women reject them. I think they reject themselves and they just don't even really try. They just, if it's more convenient for them to bitch and moan, because there's nothing, I don't care. There's no level of ugliness where you can't fuck somebody. There just isn't. I don't care I don't care if half your face is burned. There's some chick that's into that. So
yeah, more friction to rub the thighs against, you know?
Yeah, I can't get laid because my weak chin. They just want chads. Like, shut up. Go get some fucking pussy. Quit being so picky.
This has always been like a really interesting subject to me because from like a sociological perspective, it's kind of worrying. We do have an increasing number of young men who are not finding relationships, not being able to make friends, not getting along with other people, not going outside, not blah, 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 killing themselves earlier, you know? And a lot of it, I think, is this sort of reifying tendency of the internet to help people find their own worst friends, where every incel can go online and find a buddy to tell them that, oh yeah, your cathenital tilt pretty much discludes you from finding human love. You should kill yourself. Like, now everyone can find a buddy like that.
Yeah, a buddy. That's
yeah.
Friend.
Big friend.
I've talked about this phenomenon before. You know, there was this idea in the early days of the internet, like, wow, it's really going to bring us all together. Nope, did the opposite.
Whoops.
Just cemented these really weird social stratifications. Because now, it used to be the town crazy could, the fucking Earth's flat, and everyone just be, shut up. But now they can go find the other people who think that way and form a little club. And it's like, we're right, the rest of the world's wrong.
Yeah, they get their t-shirts and like the fucking mugs and everything. Yeah, before, it used to be so much harder to find other similar toxic influences. And now it is so goddamn easy.
Right. So that's kind of how I view the incel phenomenon. But I guess it is kind of worrying because it does seem like there's some sort of predisposition in that community towards acting out in violent ways or acting out in self-harming ways. I just wish, maybe we just need to fucking, I don't know, maybe we just need to get to the point where sex robots are convincing enough that those guys can just fuck those.
Okay, listen, I am very pro sex robot caucus. Okay. I'm not in any way standing against that, but I do wonder, one of the things I talk about a lot is gender abolitionism. Are you familiar with the term?
No.
My idea essentially is that since gender is a social construct, I feel as though the roles and expectations that come along with it are more harmful than they are beneficial, and an ideal society would be a genderless one. We would still have sex, of course, like, you're born with this, you're born with that, but the idea of assigning like socialized characteristics to those sexual attributes would be completely gone. And
I consider myself to be an individualist. I think that people should make whatever fucking choices they want, within reason, obviously respecting the consent of other people. So I mean, I have no problem with that. I don't know that I guess I embrace a genderless society.
More of like a long-term goal, not something to actively like fight for right now.
Not like tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if social evolution leads it down that path. I think that's fine. I mean, look, as long as there's tits and ass and dicks, we're good.
Oh, those ain't going nowhere. Or they'll all get sort of amalgamated into a tentacle-like appendage.
Just a big old like giant jumble of tits, ass, and dicks. I think that's a okay place to be.
So. We're moving in that direction. No, okay, that's fantastic to hear. One of the things that really this is one of the things that I have to be careful about advocating for because it's one of those positions that I feel people can misinterpret and use them towards more like misogynistic ends. But I've long felt that there are, this isn't exactly a controversial take, sexism often hurts men too. I know you know that. And the patriarchy kind of reinforces some harmful tendencies towards men. And one of the ones that bothers me the most is that men aren't considered beautiful. There are some men who are considered beautiful, but we don't have like this broad treatment as being objects of attention and desire the way women are. And I think that imbalance hurts a lot of people because men grow up thinking they're fucking ugly. Have you ever struggled with those thoughts that like no matter how successful you are in like a romantic or sexual sense, because I definitely have, that you're still fundamentally like kind of like a grungy person and that women are like a different type of thing?
I mean, I've never really thought about it, I guess, but yeah, I see your point. I wonder if that is uh, a result of society or in societal pressure, or if that's like an inherent trait. I'm not sure.
It's really, really tough. And it's highly anthropological, which is outside
I've
my
never
field of
really,
understanding.
I look when it comes down, like I've taken the I forget which of the fucking tests it is where it's like it asks you between, it kind of pegs you between where you are and like essentialism versus whatever the opposite of fucking essentialism,
Constructionism?
right? Constructionism.
Mhm.
And it seems like I fell right kind of in the middle. So it seems like I think, I'm not really sure. So I don't know whether that is a biological reality. I mean, in a lot of species, in fact, in most species, it's the men who do the big sexual displays. It's the male
Oh, yeah,
peacock,
we got the poofy
big,
fucking
beautiful
rainbow feathers.
women
Yeah.
and shit, And so I don't know. The male birds are always the fucking brightest, um, you know. So they're usually it's the males of the species that have the sexual displays. So it's kind of weird that in humanity it seems like maybe it's inverted. So is that a fucking result of some kind of social conditioning? I don't
It's
know.
it's a
So
weird schism because in other species, usually the animal that initiates the mating dance is the one that has the most beautiful plumage, and that's what they get judged by. But for us, men are still expected to initiate the mating procedures, but women are the ones who are assigned the characteristics that we deem attractive. So it's almost like there's a schism where we're the one who has to put in the effort, but we're the
right.
ones fighting for their
I think
perceived beauty. You
I
know?
feel like the sentiment that you're bringing up here is kind of something that feeds into that incel thing too. Like there's a sense of like this isn't really fair. Why, you know? But I don't know. Like I said, it's not something I've devoted.
No. I agree. Yeah. It's just like an interesting subject for me because I do worry. Like, right now, China is going through this really big like gender crisis
Mhm.
because of the one-child policy that they had for such a long time. Some
Right.
families in peasant villages would drown the girl childs they'd have, so there'd be more boys than girls. And now there are a ton of boys who can't find a date. You know,
Right.
and it's a real problem over there. And I just wonder if the fact that we've given women a new thing to be, but haven't really updated our understanding of how men should be in a while, we haven't really given them a new narrative, a new story, kind of
Right.
hurts everyone because now guys feel like they're pulled between the archetypical toxic man and like this new weird like effeminate alternative that doesn't sit right with some people.
Yeah. That's why I just feel like everyone's got to find their own path to some
Yeah.
extent. I mean, um, I feel like you just have to try. It's hard, and with when you have the background radiation of a lot of elements in society giving you different ideas of what you should be, how you should act, what kind of conduct is expected of you. I feel like it's really hard to just kind of like drown all that out and really look into the core of yourself and say, who the fuck am I really? But I think that's what people really have to try to do.
Yeah. And we need to get better, more fancy clothes made for men as well, because men's
Yeah,
clothing shopping is
absolutely.
fucking
'Cause
garbage.
it's pretty hideous.
Hmm.
It's just like here's a fucking here's a sack to wrap around yourself.
Yeah, here's a fucking burlap. Here you go. We've got two colors of burlap sack, and here's the jeans pile. Have fun.
You know, we could all I think we could all look to the pimp community and kind of take something from their wardrobe essentially.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure remains my unironic fashion dream, the inspiration above all.
Yeah. I can see it.
Yeah. Have
I,
you seen JoJo? You know what I'm referring to, right?
I have a passing familiarity. I can't really say I've taken a deep dive, but
Very
uh,
flamboyant. Very good.
Yeah, it's good to be flamboyant. It's good to fucking express yourself through your fashion. I've never really done it much, but it's good to do.
I feel like art. I mean, that's art. When you're fashionable, that's art. You're adding to the artistic
Right.
value of the world when you step
Well,
outside and you're beautiful.
I'm a big fan of a lot of these like very ostentatious singers like Marilyn Manson and David Bowie and stuff. So I mean, those guys are very obviously fashion conscious in a way that I don't think I personally am. But I'm fucking 6'6", and it's really hard to even find clothes that fit.
Wait, you're
so,
6'6"?
Yeah.
Holy shit. Okay. Jesus. Well, chat, you found the new king, I guess. My God, I had no idea.
Yeah, I'm 6'6", 330 pounds of fucking just I don't even know what, but it's hard to find clothes that fit, let alone clothes that I think are fashionable. So
Yeah, the only store we have is Big and Tall, I think. They cater to like big guys.
It's fucking hideous.
Yeah. It's just again, the aforementioned burlap sack,
It's
not
worse,
not
it's
great.
even worse than a big dude. It really is. So
Yeah, you've got fucking 4 inches on me. It must be worse for you. Well, I've got good news and bad news. That's every conversational topic that I had written down before speaking with you.
Sure.
And while I'm still happy to talk with you for some time, I think this has been like legitimately the best discussion that I've ever had on this channel, or at the very least, like up there.
Oh Jesus, dude. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm just saying you go right now. I'm just saying like thank you, seriously.
Wow. I mean, I don't know how to react to that. I mean, I was just going for passable, so there you go.
Well, you know what they say. Shoot for the post 20 feet away, miss, and accidentally hit the moon somehow. Escape the gravitational pull of the Earth. Yeah,
I'm very flattered by that. Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can keep talking. I'm
Yeah, of course. No, I wasn't ushing off. I just saying in case the non-prepared topics end up devolving into hideous blood sports. I wanted all of the non-animus congratulations to go around
I think
first.
you'll find that even if I disagree with someone, I'm pretty agreeable, and I try to be honest. So
I've had a difficulty with that. I think sometimes. Not honesty, but with charitability.
Hey, let's argue about freedom of speech.
Oh, you're right. All right, hit me. Do you want to hit it up first, or shall I?
So let's. I'm hoping that everyone in your crowd has seen the video where you were arguing with that gentleman of modest intellectual means.
The one where I was playing Resident Evil at first.
Yes. Yeah, and then you kind of got too mad to play anymore, I think.
Yeah.
Well, look, so I was thinking about it, and look, I consider myself to be a free speech absolutist, but I'm not unrealistic about the notion that certain speech can be harmful. But I just wonder, and I know this is a very cliche kind of question, where do we draw the line? So let me give you an example. You said, like, well, I'm not saying every conservative should be censored. I'm just saying, these people who target people and harass people. But like, look, one of the tenets of conservatism is, universal healthcare is bad. It wouldn't work. We need this fucking private healthcare system that kills fucking 30 to 60,000 people a year. So should that be allowed? Should they be allowed to advocate for that position in the context that it really is a promotion of violence?
So there's a distinction that I want to make here.
Sure.
When it comes to freedom from persecution from the government, I am very, very, very strong on the First Amendment. I don't think I am completely fine with the First Amendment as it is now. Maybe there's some incredibly conceited nuance.
Let me ask you this then. Let me just kind of test that really quick.
Yeah,
give a bit of a purity test. So the Supreme Court unanimously reaffirmed that hate speech is not a violation of freedom of speech. That's not a separate distinction in the Westboro Baptist Church case. I don't remember the year. It was 2013-ish, somewhere roundabouts there. Do you agree with that decision?
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, I think that hate speech is free speech. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, we're not talking about government intervention then. We're talking about
the social the social fighting against certain speech. Yeah.
Okay, so what would you think then, if that's where you are? What would you think then about the argument that, if you kick these like far right kind of extremist sort of bigoted people off of these platforms, they tend to congregate in platforms where there are no sort of other voices there, where it's like, okay, you're kicked off of Twitter, now you go to Gab, and literally everyone's fucking anti-Semitic. Doesn't that kind of just stratify them even further into their fucking hateful ideologies in a way that maybe it wouldn't as much if they were able to express themselves on a mass platform like Twitter, where at least they're exposed to other points of view.
I used to agree with your perspective on this, but it seems like deplatforming off of major platforms decreases substantially their ability to advocate and to bring in new followers. I used to think this. I used to think we need to have these people out in the open so we can fight them. Their ideas are idiotic. We need to be able to fight them. That helps us. But then over the past few years, I think we've seen that even if we do fight them, they can still make huge grounds on large social spaces. But many of the people who've been forced off them, they've been forced to go to places like Gab or Telegram or BitChute or whatever, have ended up having a substantially decreased audience and a decreased, monetary incentive to keep fighting. And I think I believe that deplatforming is usually very hurtful to the people it affects.
Right. So I guess then it comes down to how do you apply that? Like, I mean, I know you were kind of trying to get into that with the other guy, but he was a little bit disruptive to the point where I don't think you necessarily got that fully across. So, like, what would be an instance where, because obviously there's some that are going to ride the line where it's like, oh, should this person be deplatformed or not? And I know you're not talking about you personally having this power, but let's just say hypothetically you are the one.
Yeah, if I could just make like what is just,
Right. And you have to be the one that metes out the justice. What are your standards for this person should be deplatformed?
So there are two perspectives that people can take on this. One of them is a perspective which seeks to maximize the utility no matter who is in charge of making those decisions. So whether or not YouTube or Twitter or whatever has a conservative or a progressive CEO, no matter what happens, as long as these rules are upheld, we try to maintain the best outcome. And then there's the argument that I would make where power is what you can grab. They're going to abuse power they get anyway. We should do everything in our power to use that power when we have it. And I don't know which of those approaches has more utility to it in each given moment. But I think when it comes to platforms as large as YouTube or Twitter, I would try to see an implementation of a TOS where it follows similar lines as the United States system of protected classes, where it's disallowed to harass or be discriminatory against people based on characteristics intrinsic to their birth or associated with them demographically. But other things, I don't know if I would be more. I don't know if I'd be comfortable going further than that, because if I did, they could come around and bite me too.
Right.
Which I want to avoid.
I always do worry when you open the floodgates of censorship that it's like, okay, well, I'm using this reasoning in this instance, but maybe someone is going to use a twisted version of my own reasoning against me at some point in the future. Like, oh, well, this point of view has to be censored because it's harmful. Oh, well, Vosh is a communist and communism has killed,
100 trillion people,
zillion people throughout history. So we have to censor Vosh because he's dangerous.
Well, let me ask you then. So let me push you on this then, because I concede that there are many ways the implementation of any type of online censorship could end up being harmful or even biting me in the ass. I completely concede that. Let's say we have YouTube, and YouTube releases its whole TOS and now gets to put down a fresh one. Do you think YouTube should be able to kick folks off for what we would now consider to be egregious abuses of the platform? Not illegal stuff, but for example, threatening to dox, or outright doxing, which is not illegal in many instances, as long as you're not blackmailing people, depending on what country you're in, or just relentlessly harassing people based on discriminatory characteristics. Like if you're a black content creator, you go up there and your comment section is just full of people who have been sent by other YouTubers who are just calling you like an uppity negro or whatever. Do you think that should be permitted, or is there a line above that?
When it comes to the TOS, and I don't want to give a weaselly answer here, but let me just start by saying that terms of service for these platforms like YouTube are written in such a way that they can pretty much do whatever they want to anyone at any time. They're written in very vague terms. If there was an explicit TOS that laid out in very clear and in no uncertain terms, this is what's acceptable, this is what's not acceptable, then I think I wouldn't have a problem with that TOS. But when the TOS is vague, then I do have a problem with it, because it just leads to a system where it's highly interpretable.
It's discretion,
Um,
yeah. Like it's
right,
just whoever they want to take out at a given moment.
right. And I understand that every system, no matter how clear it is going to have some sort of level of interpretation like that. Um, so but I make it as explicit as possible. So as far as someone being harassed, I don't think that should be allowed. Harassed on the basis of something beyond their control anyway.
What about like Crowder, for example? Like he kept making the like what was it, gay fairy? He wanted to print out that shirt Carlos Maza as a fag. Like he had like a lot. I mean, he went in on it too,
Yeah.
and he got demonetized. But do you think that was right?
That's a very difficult one, and I take it very seriously. I do. I'm just so reluctant to censor someone, especially someone who, look, I don't respect Steven Crowder as an artist or an entertainer, but he inarguably is those things. And I really just kind of default on the side of giving people like that a wide latitude to express themselves. Even if I think that probably the results of their self-expression are harmful in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess but at the same time, I mean, we're talking about targeted harassment of a person. So that's a really tough one. It really is like, it almost puts my brain at an impasse.
The interesting thing to me is we can't actually make a decision on this based on how much utility we get from banning them. Because I could make the argument, and you brought this up to begin with, that if we actually wanted to prevent as much harm as possible, one of the first things we could do would be deplatforming like centrist Democrats and like longstanding Republicans, because or people who advocate for those policies. Because, like, for example, the Iraq War, a lot more harmful than anything that has come out of YouTube.
Right. And that's, of course, I mean, that's a mainstream. I mean, like, should we go kill 500,000 Iraqis or more? That's a fucking perfectly legitimate discussion in mainstream politics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, it's kind of hard to say, well, that should be allowed, but don't say fag.
Here's my main concern. So I acknowledge the fact that it is impossible to legislate TOS with regards to the utility of banning people, because if you do that, we open up the floodgates to everything. Well, what about banning people who advocate for nuclear power, because nuclear power, Chernobyl, like we open the floodgates to a very extreme level. But my main concern is that as someone who does generally like free speech very much, I think I come pretty positively when it comes to free speech in most instances. There is
what we do has to kind of, to some extent anyway.
I'm sorry?
I feel like someone who does what we do kind of has to have some deference to freedom of speech.
Yeah, and it's often said among socialists that to be a socialist is to attempt to meet the promises brought about by the Enlightenment, rather than to reject them entirely. Because I do believe in things like human egalitarianism, human rights, free speech, free education, that sort of thing. But when it comes to this, my main concern about freedom of speech is that it is not merely the legal access to freedom of speech which determines your ability to engage in it. It's the level of incentive and disincentivization you experience. Much in the same way that it was legal for white citizens counselors and Ku Klux Klanners to show up outside of Southern polling booths back during the 1920s and 30s with big old signs saying, "You know your place." That is legal. What it does is it fundamentally stifles the ability for others, the black folk, to express their freedom of speech. And I think that you actually, on online platforms, bolster freedom of speech to an extent when you prevent levels of harassment that disincentivize or discourage minorities from being able to participate. Essentially, to avoid banning intolerance is to implicitly allow it to stymie the rights of people who are affected by it.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a very interesting perspective. And I actually, in an old video of mine, this is kind of an aside. I'll get back to it.
No, please.
I actually, in an old video of mine, not that old, a few years back, I took a Southern literacy test that they used to administer to black voters. That was really eye-opening in terms of just how ridiculous the test was. Absolutely absurd. It was just designed to where it cannot be passed. So I mean, that there's an example. I don't know if that's necessarily right along the lines, but you got me thinking about it. but it is really kind of an example of like, let's censor this person because they're, you know, a minority or whatever. So yeah, I mean, there is an ability, I think, for people with a giant bully pulpit to curtail, like, I guess that is kind of the paradox, because if you get big enough and you get powerful enough and you get influential enough, you do have the ability to shut other people up that say what you don't like. Which is, of course, you know, when we're talking not about the legal definition of freedom of speech, but the fucking concept of freedom of speech, I can see how that can be a problem. You know, if you try to, you know, silence a journalist that writes an article you don't like because you have, you know, 5 million fucking followers or something, you know, obviously you're not respecting that journalist's freedom of speech. So I guess to some extent it kind of gets to the whole idea of, you know, does my right to throw punches end where your face begins? I don't know. It's really
it's
fucking
really it's really difficult.
Look, I think that you're onto something with it. I definitely think that it's an idea that people should weigh out and take very seriously. I think that a lot of people who are, you know, I would describe myself as a free speech absolutist, but I've struggled with it, you know, on more than one occasion. And I think this is probably one of those occasions because I've never quite thought about it in the framework that you're providing for me. So I'm not sure. I'm really just not sure. I don't want to be I don't want to be reflexively just like I defend this no matter what. But you know, I think you're onto something, and
it's an insanely difficult topic. It's sometimes the nuance feels like it's non-existent when you're talking with people who don't. When people come to it like really ideologically loaded, and it feels like opposing their sentiment makes it seem as though there's no nuance in the discussion. But I acknowledge, like, determining what should get people banned off private, but at this point effectively public platforms is incredibly difficult. I do want to say this though, in an ideal world, because right now we're talking about this through the lens of massive global tech companies deciding what is and isn't okay on their platforms.
Yeah, and that's also an uncomfortable conversation, which
very uncomfortable for me.
We haven't even delved into that aspect of like, you know, do we really want what we can say being controlled and manipulated by a select few fucking business interests, which I think we're both probably firmly against that.
Yeah, my main concern, of course, is when I talk about like what should be an acceptable TOS. What does it mean to get banned off Twitter or YouTube? I'm talking about from within the context of a very flawed dynamic. Obviously, if I could change the exterior system, make it so we had a different way of projecting our voices without like the implicit approval of tech CEOs, that would obviously be preferable. But I do want to clarify
with the hand we're dealt. So
yeah, in an ideal world, whatever type of social censorship we would see, not from the state, nobody being arrested, but what would get people pushed off private platforms or get people like shouted down at public speaking events. Ideally, this would be a cultural movement we would come to make together. Like right now, in pretty much every corner of America, I shouldn't generalize. This probably isn't true, but in most good parts of America, if you go out there with a you know a loudspeaker and a soapbox and start screaming about how like you should be able to rape children, like that's just something we should be able to do. No matter how passionate the man's arguments, he's going to end up like coated in egg whites and tomatoes by the end of the day, or worse. Yeah. And I think that's great. I think it's fantastic that as a society we have moved in a direction where something like that is not illegal, but so socially discouraged that we don't even tolerate it. Because I don't want to have to fear for all the fucking kids, you know, in case somebody actually gets compelled by those arguments. That's what I would like to see. Not tech companies, not hoity-toity academic socialists making the decisions, but people collectively rejecting Nazism, racism, anti-Semitism, that kind of stuff. And that way, maybe I think we can make easier judgments about whether or not it's okay.
I worry about if you make the litmus test for it, you know, what the more popular position is, or like, you know, because you can, I mean, like you have to think too, like there was a point in history where, you know, if someone's like, came out and said, I think that, gay people should have rights, they would be the ones covered in,
Yeah.
in
But all
tomato.
social change is downwind of public movements, right? I mean, that's just something we have to fight for. There's never a guarantee that we'll end up in the right place, only that we can fight for it.
It's not only bad ideas that are roundly rejected by the public consciousness, though. There's also good ones that, that meet with a fucking strong, virulent opposition. I mean, I kind of worry about tethering it to that standard as well. I don't know that there's an ideal solution to this. I mean, I guess that's kind of a cop out to just say like maybe there's no answer, but
that's true. I mean, that is also the correct answer.
answer.
I would never be arrogant enough to suggest that there's like a way to solve free speech. That's like I mean, this is probably like just a perpetual civilizational argument that we're always going to have. But I think in the meantime, we're probably fighting on the right side of it.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a 100% resolution, but I do think that, whatever sort of nuance we inject into it, I do think that broadly embracing freedom of speech as a concept is probably a good idea. But
no, I completely agree, and I reject all of the authoritarian socialists who or so-called socialists who reject freedom of speech as like a value. I've heard a few people talking about how like the Cultural Revolution is good because in actuality you don't want your museums and history ledgers to be filled with bourgeois influences. Holy shit, God help me, get me away from these people,
Yeah, I'm not too keen on most forms of authoritarianism. So,
yeah.
Although, I guess, I feel like there is probably a streak in me where I can relate to the fuck like, oh yeah, the strong man that's going to save us, or some sort of tinge of like conservatism. But I feel like it's outweighed pretty strongly, but it's definitely there.
I mean, it's very tempting, and everyone I think fantasizes about a world in which they somehow manage to work their way into power and then fix everything,
Right. I mean, I've definitely sat there and had the dictator fantasy before. So like, and then I'd do this and then I'd form the tribunal and, it's like, all right.
No, well, yeah. It is conceptually the fastest way to fix problems. It just doesn't tend to work out too well. But no, I think it's a sympathetic.
No, it's a fun fantasy though. So, whatever. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no. I just wanted to say I'm probably going to have to run because I have to read donos before I go. And then I have to have food and I haven't had breakfast yet. But awesome. I really enjoyed talking to you. And I hope we can do so more in the future.
Oh, yeah. Sounds great. I'd definitely love to come back on at some point. I feel like there's a lot more we could definitely discuss that might be interesting. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Keep kicking ass, keep staying honest and keeping other people honest. Cause I think, that's like tremendously a valuable thing in what I consider to be a largely disingenuous platform full of phonies. So keep doing that. Keep doing you, keep being Vosh. I'll keep watching.
And please keep being TJ Kirk. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Phenomenal conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Goodbye.
Goodbye. That was legitimately one of the best conversations I have ever had on my stream. Holy shit. That was fantastic.